Good afternoon. Today I'm going to be reviewing the WM watch WM193 GMT. This watch is available from WMWatch.com for €131. So firstly, let's look at the box that the watch comes in, and then I'll talk you through the specifications of the piece. So the watch comes in this black cardboard box, and inside it houses a hard shell travel case, which I'll show you. So this is the hard shell travel case. I'll show you the interior. Inside is fully upholstered with a black velour fabric to a good standard, and in the base the watch sits on a cut out piece of sponge, and it does a good job of protecting the watch in shipping from any damage. Now I'm going to give credit to WM Watch here because they could have taken the default option of using a plastic or cardboard watch box. Bearing in mind this is a low tier piece at €131. This hard shell travel case is good quality and I like it. So with regards to the items you get with the watch, it also comes with two tags. On the reverse of one tag is a barcode, and on the reverse of the other tag is a certificate of quality, and it says QC pass, and that indicates that there is a quality control procedure in place, and it's good to see the WM193 GMT we're going to be looking at has passed the quality control inspection. You get this owner's instruction manual, clear concise diagrams, and the instructions are in English. It details the operation of the movement used, which is the Seiko NH34A automatic. And this is the leaflet that comes with the watch, and clear concise diagrams. The instructions are in English and it details step-by-step instructions of how to resize a pushpin bracelet, so a very useful read if you're unfamiliar with resizing pushpin bracelets. And lastly, you also get this bracelet resizing tool, which is made from plastic, and it does work to a satisfactory standard, so good to get this included for resizing the pushpin bracelet. So with regards to the specifications of the piece, the WM193 GMT is clearly an homage to the Grand Seiko SBGN029 GMT. Very similar proportions to the SBGN005, but there are some notable differences. On the Grand Seiko, the crown position is at 3 o'clock with two crown guards, and the date window is also at 3 o'clock. So WM Watch have made an homage to it, very similar design, but they've moved the crown to 4 o'clock, and also the date window is at 4 o'clock on this piece. But the shape of the case with the lyre twisted lugs and also the bezel and the applied indices and dolphin handset are very similar to the Grand Seiko SBGN005, which this is an homage to. So we have a 40.6mm case diameter. We have a lug-to-lug measurement of 48mm, we have a thickness of 12.3mm and a lug width of 20mm. The oyster-style bracelet tapers from 20mm at the lugs down to 18mm at the two-button push clasp. The two-button push clasp is signed to a good standard with high-definition engraving. You can see WM is engraved in Garamond font. Now I'm going to be critical of this, and I'll clarify why. If you look at the lid to the watch box, you can see we have the WM emblem, which is very aesthetically pleasing, and below it we have WM Watch in Garamond font. And now on the dial, we've got an applied WM emblem, which is good, and that matches the engraved WM emblem on the crown. So it's good to see a signed crown rather than a sterile crown, which would be a cost-cutting measure. But however, there's a lack of continuity in the branding because we don't have the WM emblem engraved on the clasp. It says WM in Garamond font, which is the same as the WM Watch text logo. I think it would look better with a WM emblem engraved as per the dial and as per the crown, so we have the same three brands in all three positions, dial, crown and clasp respectively, and also the positioning would look better if they moved it up to the top of the clasp rather than the centre. So they need to delete this WM in Garamond font and engrave the emblem to match the branding on the rest of the piece. Flat sapphire crystal with clear AR coating, and the clear anti-reflective coating does an outstanding job of reducing the glare and the highly reflective nature of the silver mirror polished applied indices and silver mirror polished dolphin handset. Contrasting red GMT hour hand with arrowhead tip contrasts very well with the blue sunburst dial, and it also complements the red GMT text at 6 o'clock. Quality of the printing to the text at 6 is very good, and I like that it's not over-branded with unnecessary specification. We simply have GMT in red text and below it automatic. The font is nice and fine and it's clearly legible, so the dial execution is very good as per the Grand Seiko SBGN005 GMT, which this is an homage to. So very similar proportions to the indices and the handset as the Grand Seiko, but I think they've made a mistake framing the date complication at 4 o'clock. I think it would look better at 3 o'clock, and also I think it would look better with a crown at 3, but this is subjective. Some collectors might like that this isn't a direct clone or copy of the Grand Seiko. It is an homage with some differences, like the crown position at 4 versus 3. Now, subjectively, I dislike the chapter ring, which is on the Rehorts for the GMT hours, because it's two-tone. The lower portion of the Rehort is white, and the upper portion is sunburst blue, which matches the dial. Now, I appreciate this is an homage to the Grand Seiko SBGN029, which does have a two-tone Rehort, but I think it would look more aesthetically pleasing if it were all sunburst blue, or alternatively all white, rather than having half and half. But this is subjective. Some collectors might like that it does look like the Grand Seiko with a white lower portion and a blue top portion, but I think it just would look more aesthetically pleasing with one colour used throughout. I prefer monochrome watches. Now, with regards to the bezel, it looks very similar to the SBGN029 GMT. Brushed satin finish to the top of the bezel, nice mirror polish chamfered to it, so no sharp edge, and the profiling is very good because the flat sapphire crystal projects slightly above the flat bezel, as you can see, and it catches the light, so it's very aesthetically pleasing. The font used on the 24 hours on the bezel is very good. It's inlaid with black paints for good standard, high definition engraving, and the quality of the inlay of the paint on the bezel is also very good. So I like the proportions of the Arabic numerals, and I also like the look of the brushed satin finishing to it. It's very aesthetically pleasing. Quality of the finishing to the case is excellent at this price point of €131. Mirror polishing to the flanks is done very well, and also the mirror polishing to the large bevels, which mark the transition between the top of the lyre lugs in brushed satin finish and the flanks in mirror polish. So very nicely done. They've also done a very good job of mirror polishing in between the lugs, and this is often an area that low tier brands neglect. They use it as a cost-cutting measure because they machine or brush satin finish the internals of the lugs rather than mirror polishing, because mirror polishing inside lugs is more expensive. It adds additional production costs. But the internals of the lugs are mirror polished, so it's very good to see mirror polishing inside the lugs, and also it matches the mirror polishing to the circumference of the bezel and also the flanks and the bevels to the case. So quality to the finishing of the head of the piece is good, no sharp edge to the undercuts of the flanks, and the tips of the lugs are nicely deburred and chamfered, so there are no sharp edges on the head of the piece whatsoever. I'll show you the case back. So we have an exhibition case back which is glazed with mineral crystal. Now, it's acceptable to use mineral crystal in a exhibition case back as a cost-cutting measure rather than sapphire, because on the front of the piece the sapphire crystal is prone to being scuffed and scratched, but on the reverse it's only rubbing against your wrist, and therefore it's not going to become easily scuffed and scratched. Mineral crystal is good enough. So the stainless steel portion is very well finished. It's concentric CNC lathe tool machined and then engraved with the specification, and the circumference is mirror polished to a very high standard. The milled slots are deburred, so no sharp edges and no burrs on the exhibition case back whatsoever. Does a good job of displaying the sterile movement, the NH34A. Now, it's an undecorated movement, so it's not very interesting to look at, but it is nice to see the movement nonetheless, and I think they've made the right decision in using an exhibition case back because it just enhances the piece. It's nice to see a movement. The quality of the engraving is very good. It feels smooth, it doesn't feel sharp, so it doesn't rub against the wrist, and it is a relatively flat, low profile exhibition case back rather than a bubble back profile, and the benefit of that is this piece is only 12.3mm, which is very impressive for an NH34A powered piece. Often NH series of movements such as the 35A and the 34A are 13mm plus. So 12.3 is very impressive, bearing in mind it has 100 meters of hermetic seal. So good quality exhibition case back. The underside to the head of the piece is deburred very well. No sharp edges to the undercuts, doesn't have sharp edges or corners to the tips of the lugs, and the end links are a good tight fit to the head of the piece. So the quality of the finishing to the head of the piece is excellent. Right, so let's look at the bracelet and clasp. Now, this is the main negative of the piece. The bracelet rattles. It's very sloppy, as you can see. We have longitudinal, lateral, up and down and side-to-side play in every single direction on every single one of the pushpin bracelet links. Now, it's a shame because it's very easy to tighten up the tolerances with a pushpin oyster-style bracelet. And as you can see, loud audible clicks because it rattles on wrist. On a positive note, no stiff links because of the extra play, so the links do articulate very smoothly. I'll just check the other side for continuity. Nice smooth articulation. So it is a sloppy bracelet, but the benefit is it doesn't kink. So the links are well finished. Beautiful luster to the brushed satin finishing to the top side and underside, and that contrasts with the flawless mirror polishing to the flanks. No sharp edges to the top side, underside or flanks, and the centre links are also deburred very well. So the bracelet doesn't pull arm hair and it doesn't scratch the wrist because there's no sharp edges. So they are the positives. But again, both sides rattle. As you can see, significant play, longitudinal, lateral, side to side, up and down play. Now that's not the only problem. The male end links also have significant play. Lateral, side to side, up and down, play in every single direction. I'll just check the other side. Again, we have the same problem. And this is simply down to poor quality tolerances. If you look at the hole drilled in the centre link, in the male end link, the hole is drilled too large. It should be an interference fit for the pin to go through, but as you can see, the hole is drilled too large or the pin is undersized because we don't have an interference fit. What we have is a sloppy fit because it wobbles in every single direction. Lateral, side to side, up and down, and longitudinal play. Play in every single direction, and it is significant play. Now, one can be magnanimous on pieces below €100. One has to expect some quality control issues and some build quality issues, but this is €131, and therefore one cannot be magnanimous. It's a defect. So it's a shame because the cumulative effect of the play in the male end links and also the bracelet is that it rattles. It's a very sloppy bracelet. Let's look at the clasp. Solid 316L grade stainless steel. Beautiful luster to the brushed satin finishing, which is longitudinal on the body and also the flanks. Nice contrasting mirror polished bevel and nice heavy gauge. Doesn't have sharp corners, no sharp edge to it, so it's deburred and chamfered throughout to a very good standard, and that is a positive. I'm pleased to see 6 micro adjustment holes, so that allows for plenty of micro adjustment in the absence of half links in the oyster style bracelet, so easy to get the correct fit. 2 button push triggers have a nice firm resistance to the spring loaded action, so that's good. Now, the internals are finished very well. Solid mil 316L grade stainless steel, as one would expect. Longitudinal brushed satin finishing has a beautiful luster to it. No sharp edges to the top side, underside or flanks. Doesn't have sharp corners, so the deburring and chamfering is done very well. However, the negative of the clasp is we have significant play in the 3 hinge pins. If you look at the left-hand hinge pin, where the bracelet joins the clasp, you can see significant play, and this is wholly unacceptable at this price point of €131. As I've detailed, one can be magnanimous below €100, but at €131 this kind of build quality is unacceptable. So longitudinal, lateral, up and down play in every single direction. The centre hinge pin, which is the main hinge pin, also has lateral side to side play, longitudinal play, up and down play in every single direction. It's wobbling. Now, lastly, we look at the right-hand hinge pin, and as you can see, again, significant play. Longitudinal, lateral, side to side, up and down play. Just bear with me, I'll get the camera to focus on it, and then you'll see it. You can see the amount of play, and it clicks. It makes an annoying clicking sound. Now, my reservation about this is the long-term durability, because when you have play in all 3 hinge pins, the problem is, with time, if you're wearing this on a daily basis, I have reservations about how long this is going to last before the riveted end of the pins shear off, or alternatively the pins shear themselves, because by having additional play, it puts the pins into additional shear load, and that makes them prone to wear and tear, and therefore they fail, they break eventually. And I think that my confidence isn't here in this 3 pins. I think that it's just not going to last long term. So it's disappointing at €131 to have this amount of play in the 3 hinge pins. These are the tolerances that need to be tightened up by WM Watch. But the clasp is well finished, no sharp edges, no burrs, and it does snap shut with a nice positive click, and I am pleased to see 6 micro adjustments, so they are the positives of it. Right, so let's test the crown execution. The push-pull crown is coin edge finished, solid 316L grade stainless steel, and no sharp edges because it's got a nice chamfer to the tips of the teeth of the coin edge finishing, and I'm pleased to see that it has a mirror polished domed cap which is signed with the WM emblem to a good standard, so it's good that the crown is not sterile as I've detailed. So as it's a push-pull crown in the closed position, we can manually wind the Seiko NH34A automatic to its maximum 41-hour power reserve. Feels nice and smooth, medium resistance, one can feel the tension in the mainspring gradually building up, so it's an absolute pleasure to manually wind the NH34A. There's no discernible difference between the 35A and the 34A in manual winding. They feel exactly the same, and I like the feeling of the mainspring tension gradually building up. The architecture of the 34A is similar to the 35A, they just add a GMT hour hand on the cannon pinion, which is driven off the date complication, as I'll demonstrate. So pulling it out to the first click position is the quick set date complication. If you look at the date window at 4 o'clock, when I rotate the crown anti-clockwise, you can see the quick set date clicks over with a nice positive indexing. Very similar to the NH35A due to the same architecture, and it's a characteristic I really like of the NH series of movements such as the 35A and the 34A we're looking at. Nice positive heavy clicks. So every day of the month clicks over with a good solid click when you rotate the crown anti-clockwise. So the red GMT hour hand is driven off the date complication. In the date setting position it also is the GMT hour setting position. So if you look at the date window, when I rotate the crown anti-clockwise it advances the date with a quick set. When I rotate the crown clockwise it rotates the GMT hour hand. Now, a characteristic I like about the NH34A is the GMT complication has a nice positive click. So you can advance the GMT hour hand with the same kind of indexing as the date complication. Each hour you can click it over to the next hour with a nice positive click. And I really like that. It's not smooth, it clicks, and it's got nice positive indexing, and the alignment is very good. When you click it to the next hour index on the dial, the hour hand, GMT hand, aligns correctly with each hour. So it's got nice positive indexing both on the quick set complication for the date and also the GMT hour hand in the date setting position. So very robust, very reliable and pleasure to use. Putting it out to the second click position on the crown hacks the movement. If you look at the second hand, you can see it's possible to set the time precisely to the second and hack the NH34A. So nice light resistance to the gearing of the 24 joules in the movement, and you can see it's smooth. So you can also rotate the GMT hour hand clockwise and anti-clockwise by cycling through the 12 hours in the conventional way if you don't want to quick set it. Feels very smooth, and I like the minimal back play. When you rotate the crown clockwise or anti-clockwise, there's minimal back play. The minute hand responds quickly, so it doesn't have a lot of slack to take up. Pushing it back in, it's got a nice positive click, and that restarts the movement. You'll see the second hand begins to sweep around the dial once again. So the NH34A is the correct choice for this piece, and I'm very impressed with this being 12.3mm because, as I've detailed, often NH35A and NH34A powered pieces are 13mm plus. This has 100 meters with an exhibition caseback, but it is only 12.3, which is very thin for a GMT complication piece powered by the NH34A. So WM Watch deserve credit for not making this too thick and top heavy, bearing in mind it's NH34A powered. Right, so I'll give you a wrist shot and you can see how it fits on my 8-inch wrist. Now, I haven't sized the bracelet, and I'm pleased to report I can easily slide an index finger beneath the bracelet clasp at all times, so that indicates this will easily fit up to an 8.5-inch wrist with no difficulties whatsoever. And bear in mind I'm on position 5 of the 6 micro adjustments, so this could potentially even fit up to a very large 9-inch wrist. So plenty of length on the oyster style bracelet, good to see plenty of links included for collectors with a larger wrist. Now, wrist presence is very good. I like the 40.6mm head of the piece. Lyre lugs, which are twisted as per the Grand Seiko SBGN029, this is an homage to, are very aesthetically pleasing, and I'm very pleased to see they've mirror polished in between the lugs because they are constantly visible regardless of whether you wear this on a oyster style bracelet or a strap, and this is very good finishing. So flat sapphire crystal is low profile, and the contrasting sunburst dial is very aesthetically pleasing because it changes from an electric blue to a navy blue depending on the light conditions, and the AR coating is working very well to reduce the glare of the flat sapphire crystal. Clarity is good. The Dolphin hands contrast very well, as do the mirror polished applied indices, which are Grand Seiko style. Framing of the date complication in silver is also very aesthetically pleasing, and I like the applied WM emblem. It does give it a higher quality look than just printing the WM emblem in white paint. Bezel is very nice. I like the brush satin finishing and the proportion of the black Arabic numerals. The font is very readable and also very legible. So, comfortable piece to wear. Nice curved undercut to the flanks. Minimal gap beneath the tips of the lyre twisted lugs. So, the only thing that would enhance this piece is the use of female pivoted end links, because it does have the perfect lug-to-lug measurement of 48mm, and I often refer to this in my reviews. 48mm is the sweet spot, regardless of whether you have a 6 to 7 inch wrist or a 7 to 8 inch wrist respectively. It is the perfect lug-to-lug measurement. So the proportions of this piece are bang on. 40.6 head of the piece is nice wrist presence, but 48 is the perfect lug-to-lug measurement. The only thing is, the male end links are rather long, as you can see. And I think this would be better if it had female pivoted end links, because that would pull the end link in the bracelet closer to the wrist. Because if you look closer, you can see there's a slight gap, because the end link is long, and therefore it projects the bracelet, the end of the bracelet links, too far away from the wrist, and they can't articulate closer because it's a male end link with a large centre section. If this had a female pivoted end link, that would halve the centre link, as you can see, and that would pull the end of the bracelet close to the wrist. So I would like to see WM Watch update the Oyster style bracelet and add female pivoted end links, because as you can see, the long male end link does detract from the look of it. But the taper is okay, 20 down to 18. Personally, I prefer the industry standard of 20 to 16 on a 40mm head of the piece, but I appreciate this is a Grand Seiko homage, and therefore a straight, more parallel bracelet does look more similar to a Grand Seiko. 20 to 18 is acceptable. It would significantly reduce the heft and therefore improve the comfort, because this is 150 grams. If they used a 20 to 16, this would get the heft down to 140 grams. Now bear in mind, you are going to remove several links from this very long bracelet, and that will bring it down to 145 grams or less. But even so, I think a 20 to 16 would be better. It would get this piece down to 135 to 140 grams. 150 is the sweet spot. If you're going to wear a piece for long periods of time, such as 8 to 12 hours per day, 150 grams or below is the sweet spot. And this is right on the limits. It's 150 grams with all the links. But that will reduce if you remove several links down to 145. So they could enhance it with female pivoted end links and reduce the taper. 20 to 16 would look better with an Oyster style bracelet, but it does look very aesthetically pleasing. No sharp edges to the bracelet, and it doesn't pull arm hairs, and it does articulate very well because it is a sloppy bracelet, so no stiff links. Good looking piece, comfortable to wear, and it does have a nice wrist presence, and I do like the tone of the electric blue to navy blue sunburst eye. I like the way it changes colour in the light, so it's a good looking piece and very readable. The legibility is very good. The silver applied indices and the dolphin hands are easy to read. Right, so let's do a Lume test, and we'll see how the Lume performs when it's charged up to the absolute maximum. So as always, I'm going to use my 100 UV LED torch to charge it up to the absolute peak. So this uses C3 Superluminova. Right, so that's now fully charged, and as you can see, it's disappointing. Now, initially, the C3 Superluminova appears to glow brightly. The exciter seems to glow brightly. There's a good colour tone match between the Lume used on the dial, on the applied indices, and also the Dolphin handset. The Dolphin hands are correctly proportioned, and I want to give due credit to WM Watch, because often with low-tier Chinese brands at this price point, they have a tendency to undersize the hands. They're too short and too underproportioned. But the length of the hands is good. You can clearly differentiate between the longer Dolphin minute hand and the shorter Dolphin hour hand. So the hands are the correct size. But however, we're clearly looking at 3 to 4 layers of C3 Superluminova. This is not 5 to 6, which is the industry standard for excellent performance. The other disappointment is they've only applied C3 Superluminova on the 12 o'clock, 9 o'clock and 6 o'clock and 3 o'clock indices. They haven't applied squares of C3 to all the indices on the dial, only the 12, 9, 6 and 3. So this is a clear cost-cutting measure. Now I appreciate this is an homage to the Grand Seiko SBGN029 GMT, which also has similar squares or rectangles of lume on certain indices rather than all of them. But however, I think it could be enhanced if they applied C3 to all of the indices, not just 4 out of the 12, or 4 out of the 11, sorry, because we have one deleted due to the date complication. There's not going to be enough room at 4 o'clock. But I just think it's a disappointment. 3 to 4 layers is a cost-cutting measure. Now, as you can see, the indices are beginning to fade and fade fast, and also on the Dolphin hands, the lume is also going to fade fast because the exciter only has 3 to 4 layers rather than 5 to 6. So there's room for improvements. I think the lume performance is acceptable at this price point in the low tier, €131. One has to expect some cost-cutting measures and be realistic, but I think that there is room for improvement. Even if it means increasing the retail price of this by €5 to €10, collectors would happily pay it to get better quality C3 Superlume Nova on all the indices, not just 4, and also the Dolphin hands, 5 to 6 layers throughout, with it on all 11 of the indices. Right, so let's discuss the movement use because it's one of my favourite aspects of the piece. You'll all be familiar with the Seiko NH34A Automatic, which is made in Japan. It's a reliable, well-proven workhorse GMT movement. 24 joules, it runs at 21,600 vibrations per hour and a frequency of 3 Hz. It has hand winding and hacking, which is used for complications, and a quick set date complication, which I've demonstrated works very well. 41-hour power reserve is very good. The stated accuracy of the NH34A is -20 to +40 seconds per day, so rather wide accuracy range as per the NH35A, which it is based upon. The architecture of the 35A and the 34A are the same. The only discernible difference is the 34A has an additional GMT hour hand mounted on the cannon pinion, and also it's driven off the date complication, but the architecture of the 35A is the same as the 34A otherwise, and therefore it's a reliable, well-proven caliber. So -20 to +40 is a rather wide accuracy range, but this one has been well regulated to +7, and +7 seconds per day is well within the -20 to +40 seconds per day stated accuracy. But I think they could do better than +7. Plus or minus 5 seconds per day is possible if you regulate an NH34A in 5 positions, so WM Watch could refine the regulation. +7 is okay, but I think +5 is attainable. But good choice of movements, and it is the correct choice for this piece at this price point, €131. I like the NH34A. No reliability issues reported. It's a reliable, well-proven workhorse GMT caliber. Build quality is good, quality control is good, accuracy is good, and the power reserve is good at 41 hours. No negatives to it whatsoever. It's also good to see it through the exhibition Caseback. Although it is sterile and undecorated, it's not an interesting movement to look at because it lacks decoration. But it's good to have an exhibition Caseback to see it. So last I'll summarise the piece. What do I think of it overall? Well, when I'm considering reviewing a watch on my channel, the watch meets 2 criteria. It should be both excellent quality and excellent value at the respective price point. So, low tier price point piece, €131. I'm going to declare it good quality, and I'm going to say the value is okay. Now, I'm not going to say excellent quality, and I'm not going to say good or excellent value, because we do have some shortcomings and QC issues. The main one is the lack of C3 on all of the applied indices, and also 3 to 4 layers versus 5 to 6. The other thing is the branding. They need to engrave the WM emblem and delete this WM in Garamond font. Now, the main negative of the piece is the poor build quality of the sloppy bracelets, and also the end links are sloppy. So they need to improve the tolerances of the bracelet, and also the 3 hinge pins, as I've detailed, which are also sloppy. They rattle. So they need to update that, and then I would be prepared to give this a rating of good or excellent quality and good and excellent value. So there are some QC issues and some shortcomings with regards to the build quality, but I'm going to recommend it to you for consideration. I hope you've enjoyed my review of the WM Watch WM193 GMT. Please feel free to post your own comments below the video. Thank you for watching.